Hey, Sonograver here. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to another science fiction review. Today we're going to be reviewing Frederik Pohl's Gateway, or Frederik Pohl. To be honest, I really don't know how to pronounce his first name. Friedrich, but his book Gateway. And just right off the bat, I just love this book cover. It really does convey what this story is going to be about. You can see the face, the head of a man, our protagonist, and you can also see something coming out of his eye, which really does depict something coming out of his mind, a kind of realization. And then you've got the cosmic art of, something in the background, as well as this mysterious, circular thing. So it's a beautiful piece of art. It's a beautiful book cover. I give it an A+. I do like a lot of book covers from the science fiction, especially written in the 1960s, maybe 50s, 60s, and 70s. I would say, though, even though I do like the atomic punk especially, and that old school, old-fashioned pulp art, a lot of science fiction book covers really don't properly convey the story or what the story is about. And I would just say this is a perfect, one snapshot illustration of what is going to be, your adventure with this protagonist. And so, a non-spoiler review, I just want to give you my impressions of the story. My impression of it is it's science fiction's science fiction. It is very much a science fiction story. Now, what does that mean? Well, science fiction in the case and in this context with Pohl's Gateway is world building and characterization, in particular with psychology. So you've got a very fantastic, very otherworldly experience with this world of this particular individual, the external world, and then you've got his introspection, you've got his interiority, you've got a very heavily psychological premise. So you've got a fantastic world building idea established in the story, and then you've got the psychology. And I think that's very, very important, very significant in science fiction. So let's start with the external part of the world building. You've got your protagonist and all these characters he's interacting with on this very mysterious orbital base, this establishment called Gateway. And if you're not on Gateway and you're not traveling in space, you are either on Earth or on Venus. So you're in the solar system, you're in our solar system, but unlike our solar system as we know it to be, unlike our reality of what Earth is like, this Earth is bleak. And even more so, Venus is bleak. It's bleaker than Earth. There's no real overbearing hierarchy establishment. There's no dystopia, but it's very much humanity is hardly surviving. It's almost kind of like this impression like they're living in the Dust Bowl, but except the whole Earth is a Dust Bowl. It's like this global relationship between everyone on Earth. This particular individual was born and raised and worked most all his young life in Wyoming, I believe. But it's not like Wyoming, like we see Wyoming with its rustic, beautiful mountainside and stuff like that. You're pretty much underground, really trying to mine the most bland of food for humanity to survive. So, if you're not on Earth, as the reader, going through these experiences with these characters, you are on this place called Gateway. Now, what Gateway is, it's a very fascinating world. I don't know really how to describe it. I can hardly remember, but it's like this dormant asteroid, this just huge base that used to be inhabited by this very mysterious alien race called the Hichi. Now, it's an ancient alien race, the Hichi. The people of Earth, humanity, knows very, very little about this alien race because, as far as we know, as far as the reader knows, the Hichi did not really want humanity to be known. That's kind of our perception. It's like they don't really give us a lot of clues about who they were, what their technology really how their technology functioned. If they were humanoid, if they were more like insects, we just don't know. As the reader and as people of living in this world, whether it's Gateway or Earth or Venus. But the Hichi had established this asteroid where now humanity is residing, and it's through Hichi technology. The one thing that the Hichi had given to humanity, so to speak, is really just these old abandoned, not fighter ships, but just real small ships that can only be occupied by either 5 people, 3 people, or 1 person. And basically, because of the way that the Hichi apparatus is working for each of these abandoned ships, the pilots or people who are manning these ships do not know where they're going. So it can be very, very dangerous. In fact, I think statistically speaking, if you go out to explore space and explore where these Hichi beings went, or if you're trying to find new habitable places for humanity, about 18%, I think it was 18 to 20% of these missions pretty much are fatal. So you have a good chance of dying on one of these missions. But the government and the people in charge, the higher ups, are really pushing all these people who are living on Gateway to explore and go on these missions. Basically, the mission is to bring new knowledge of the Hichi and bring new knowledge of any possible location that is habitable for people on Earth, because you pretty much are suffering. Humanity is suffering under these very terrible conditions. So it's almost worth going out, and getting yourself killed for the possibility of acquiring such important knowledge, whether it's of the Hichi alien race or finding something that would be good for humanity. And so, the government, because, to push this incentive, to push people to really risk their lives and sacrifice themselves, they give them huge benefits, like huge incentives. Like, you have the chance of becoming very, very wealthy by just bringing in artifacts of the Hichi. Like, they're very clean, this alien race. They don't want to leave anything except these abandoned ships. But if you can find an artifact, that can mean hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars between you and the other pilots. Or if you were on a one-man ship, that $1 million is going to you. So there is a huge incentive for people to get extremely wealthy, because the very wealthy, at least the very wealthy, have a kind of elite, safe, secure existence on this almost uninhabitable Earth. So the premise is very interesting. The world building, this giant dormant asteroid where you reside in, what it looks like, full of tunnels, and I mean, it's just very, very, very interesting. And even the bleakness that is mining for basic food in underground of Wyoming and Utah or whatever. It's still very, very fascinating. But Frederik Pohl is just great. He makes Earth seem very otherworldly. Like, this is not an escapist kind of novel. You really do feel the pressures of existence with this kind of thing. So the world building, whether it's Gateway or being on Earth, it's very fascinating. It's not a place you want to be in, but you are. And this is where we get into the internal world building. The internal world building that is the interiority of this man. His name is Robinette, which he's made fun of for, because it's a more feminine name. So he goes by Rob or Robbie, which he doesn't like. So I'll just probably call him Rob for the remaining portion of this video. So Rob is a young man who had worked in the mines with his parents, and he had just with a sheer stroke of luck, unfortunately after some tragedy, with his family in the mines. He wins the lottery to go to Gateway. And so you're pretty much in Gateway for the majority of the story. And you're kind of going through the tunnels and going through these rooms and interacting with different people in different ways through the eyes and the perspective of this man. Now, the reader over a few chapters starts to see that this man is a very troubled, very tormented individual. And this book in particular, this book is really for the empathetic reader who does not mind a lot of introspection. And a lot of people can be turned off by that. A lot of people can think, okay, well, I don't want to just kind of be in this guy's perspective the whole time with no real action, no real adventure. But Frederik Pohl, I learned of this with reading his short stories. He knows how to deal with the introspection, with someone's tormented mind, with his prose, because his prose really works like dialogue. His narrative works like dialogue. It's almost as if you're reading letters from a soldier, from a far off place, going to war or something like that. It's a very much a conversationalist kind of perspective with this man Rob's interiority. And so you're kind of with him, almost as if you're just alongside him his whole time. And you see and you feel what he feels. You see what he sees. You might not like what he thinks or like what he says or like what he does. He's not a disagreeable young man, but you know that he is suffering a lot of, we'll see a little bit later I'm not going to spoil anything, but basically he's experiencing his memories of such an adventure or such an experience with Gateway, with Gateway itself and the people he's interacting with, and then also his missions. He actually does go on a few missions, which is very important to the story. You seem to understand, well, at least in my experience, I understand what he's going through, and I get afraid when he gets afraid. He not only is tormented by things that have happened in his past. I mean, big things, big things, but also he wants to be rich. He wants a better life for himself. He wants to, be committed to a woman and have a family and have a life of security. But he is so afraid of going on these missions because a lot of people, even if they come back, even if they survive the mission, they're either in comatose or they're starving almost to death. They're maybe dehydrated. Maybe there had been a case of cannibalism. After someone dies, out of 5 people, the other people eat the person. It's very dark. It's very dark. So he's so conflicted. And I've been in that moment, not that dark a moment, but I've been in that moment of restlessness where he's not satisfied where he is, but he is so afraid of moving forward. So that's really the pretty much the focal point, but also the meat of the whole story. You're going along with him and his troubles, his concerns, and his mistakes. And there's one point in the story where a lot of people would just abandon him. I'm sure a lot of readers would abandon him because he does something pretty terrible. But in the end, he does something heroic very instantaneously. I almost missed it. I actually had to read it like 2 or 3 times. And then Professor Geek, who had read it before, he confirmed I had read it correctly. So he does a very noble, heroic act, but at an incredible and ironic cost. It's masterfully done. It's masterfully done. On the whole, this story by itself is a tragedy. So if you're not really into tragedy, this book might not be for you. But subsequent novels after these events take place actually, I guess, have a more or less brighter tone. I don't know. Professor Geek loves this book as a standalone. This is a standalone as a tragedy, but there are books following that actually might have lessened this tragedy a bit. So I'm just going to say that. But if you're reading it just by itself, it affects you. Well, if you're an empathetic person, it affects you. So, so I all around thought it was really good in terms of world building and interiority. If you're looking for action and adventure, this is not the science fiction for you. There's a lot of tension and there's a lot of darkness, and you're feeling very tense moments. You're feeling the people, not just the protagonist, but you're feeling the people around him interact with him, and just a lot of psychology. So it's pretty tense. It's a very tense, I would say it's a very tense read. But also conversationalist, like the man is telling you through letters or through a discussion what's going on. So if you prefer the interiority with really cool sci-fi world building, and it really is good sci-fi world building, but you know, and you're okay with not having like major action, I think this is the story for you. If you are Christian, just be prepared and read this with a lot of maturity and a lot of I wouldn't say grace, but there is a lot of language. There's a lot of language in this book because of the torment that this young man has experienced and is experiencing. There are a lot of irreligious moments, I would say. But I say that lightly, like there's just you see the dark moments of a tormented soul with this individual. And so if you can read as a Christian with a level of maturity and kind of say, okay, this man is undergoing a lot of suffering, then you can kind of get through it. And yeah, he's just he goes through a lot of moral quandaries, and then there's a final resolution at the end, and it's only a revelation that brings him down all the more. It was a revelation he had to come to. So, all in all, it's a wonderful piece of fiction in terms of science fiction. Now, I wanted to say too, I do want to say one thing. I didn't really see it until quite later in the book because I'm kind of slow. I don't comprehend that well. But this book, Frederik Pohl, he actually does work. I don't want to cheapen it in any regard, but he works in 2 timelines of this man's life. And he does it so seamlessly that I was like, oh, that's totally fine. Like when I realized what was happening, how the events were, I sort of knew intuitively what was going on with the 2 different timelines. But it's basically him working his problems in the past while also kind of remembering the past as if it were happening in real time. And Pohl just does it seamlessly. Like he just so masterful, because I wanted to say that outright because I am a person who, unless it's really well done and unless it's done very sparingly, I do not like flashbacks. Like unless it's really well executed, I'm just not a reader of flashbacks. But because you're dealing with the psychology of this person, so memory, repressive memory, all that sorts of stuff, working with the id, you're working with a lot of even Freudian ideas and Jungian ideas. So again, if you're a Christian, just kind of take it with a grain of salt. You're going to work with a lot of Freudian and Jungian ideas. With all of that just masterfully done and woven into like 2 different timelines, I didn't really realize what was happening until like the middle of the book. So just know that he is really working very effectively with 2 different timelines in this man's experience. So I will end it with that. This was actually a much longer non-spoiler review than I had intended. But yeah, I just wanted to let you know, I would say personally, I mean, if I were to rate it as a standalone tragedy, I would say Frederik Pohl, or Friedrich. I'm going to say Frederick until I'm corrected. Okay. Frederik Pohl's book Gateway, I would give it a good probably 3.5 out of 5 stars. I think it's worth reading. If it's not a seminal piece of science fiction, I think at least it's very significant especially if you want to learn how to work with narrative, world building, prose, and interiority in your science fiction. So, with that out of the way, I wish you the best in whatever you choose to read. That is my take on Frederik Pohl's Gateway. And until I see you next, keep producing and preserving the wonderful art and literature that you love. And I'll catch you later. Thanks.